Hello everyone, my name is Thomas, and today in this video we're going to begin the first part of a two-part Adobe Illustrator demo series. In this demo we're going to be creating this little scene that I made earlier. In it we'll be going over all of the tools that we've used thus far, and so without further ado, let's get started. So to begin, let's start by creating a new file. So going up to File, New. We have all these options. For this one we're going to be using a letter document. If you need to find it, go to Print. Here it is, Letter. We'll also make it horizontally in Landscape. And we're going to be doing this in RGB. Don't worry about this little triangle right here. This just means that you're switching over to a color mode that is not supported by a printer, or not as supported by a printer, for something that would likely be printed. We're also going to change our raster effects to 72 ppi. That should be all that we need to do. So let's create. So before we begin, let's break down what we have here. So as you can see, we have various different elements here. On the left we have our text, and then followed by some sort of panel gaps, places where panels meet up. Then we have our porthole, the porthole frame. Then we have the glass that goes in it. Then we have the reflection of the planet. And then we have our little astronaut's face inside. We also have the shadow of the planet. And so to begin, we'll actually start with the porthole and the various porthole elements. So if we go back, what we'll do is we'll start with a circle. So what we'll go is we'll right click on the rectangle tool icon, go to Ellipse, and here we'll just drag out. And we'll create just a regular size circle. Now to start, we'll start by renaming our layers. So this layer group is going to be called porthole, and we'll kind of go over how this works as we go. So for this outermost circle, it's going to be a black outline with a gray inside. So what we'll do is we'll have our selection tool, select it, and for our fill, we want a grayish color. We'll go with something like that. And the stroke, it's not quite black, so we'll make it black. Then we'll bump up the stroke in our properties panel. Bump it up to say 5 pixels. There we go. We'll reposition it a little bit, scale it down a little bit. Alrighty. The next thing we'll create is our glass inside. So again, we'll do the same thing, just draw a circle, click and drag a circle. So for this circle, we'll actually have a gradient fill, so we'll make sure we have our fill selected, and we'll select gradient. Now this is like a 3-part gradient. We'll be using the linear gradient for this one. So what we'll do is we'll just add, if we click down here below the bar, we'll see there's a plus sign next to our cursor. Add that. And I believe the color scheme is black, then purplish, and then a slight bit of white at the end. So what we'll do is we'll do the same thing. So we'll make this one black. Just double click on the node. For this one, we'll go with this kind of purpley color. I like it. For this last one, again, double click, and we'll select white. Now for this, we'll scooch it over quite a bit. We just want that little bit of haze at the end, but we also want to smooth it out, so we'll kind of push it to the very edge. We've got a little rotation, something like 45 degrees, maybe 30 degrees. I think that's how I had it selected. Bring this forward a little bit. Alright, I'm happy with that. We'll actually reduce the stroke on this a little bit, so we'll close this menu. And we'll bump it down to 3 pixels. I think 3 pixels will do. We'll move this over and we'll line it up, and you'll see in the center of these circles there's a little point that says center. You'll see these guides, these pink guides. Just kind of look around and find the one that says center. Now this is a little too big, so what we'll do is we'll actually go over to our transform menu over here. This is still in the properties menu, and you can see that we have our X, Y, W, H. And what these are your X and Y coordinates, X being how far left to right it is, how many pixels it is. So it's right now 529 pixels from the left. And your Y is your up and down. So it's 277 pixels the center. It's 277 pixels up from the bottom. Now your width and your height are your W and your H. So here they're the same. So what we'll do is we'll actually click on this little, it looks like a chain with a slash through it. And you'll see that it's now connected. So whatever changes we do to this value, it'll do the same to that value, to the height value. So we want this to be a little smaller, so we'll maybe do 270. Yeah, that's about right. We'll maybe do 265. There we go. The next thing we'll add is our nuts. The nuts around the frame. So what we'll do is we'll go to our shape tools, and we'll actually select the polygon tool for this one. What we'll do is just grab and drag out and hold shift, so that way it stays upright. We'll just make make them pretty small but pretty beefy. We'll bump down the stroke to 1 pixel. And right now we don't want these as a gradient fill, we just want these as solid colors. So what we'll do is we'll select our fill, or solid fill, and we'll double click on our fill, and we want these to be a gray, but a darker gray than our panel, than our frame. So we'll select something along those lines. We'll get to positioning. To zoom in and out, what you'll do is you'll hold Alt and scroll. Likewise, you could also open your Windows tab and use the navigator. You can stash that in the top right or wherever you want it, and have that to move around. So what we're going to do is we're going to place this so that way it's at the top dead center of our circle. So you can see there's that pink guide that tells us when it's there. So grab and drop. And what we'll do is, just like with text, what we can do is you can click it, you can hit Control C and then Control V, and that'll copy and paste it to a new location. So what we'll do for this one is we'll move it down to the bottom, because what we're going to be doing is copying these 2 bolts at the distance they are and rotating that around their center point. So we have these 2 nuts and bolts. They're in the exact same position on each side of the circle. And so what we'll do is we'll click the first one, and we'll go to our other one and hold shift and left click the other one. You'll see that a box now appears. What we can do is, likewise, when we copy the 1 bolt at the top to the one at the bottom, we can do the same thing with multiple. So Control C, Control V. We now have them together. Now what we're going to want to do is click and drag them so that way they're on top of the old bolts. And what we're going to do is we're going to put our mouse so that way it's slightly outside of the box. You'll see that your cursor turns into these 2 arrows at like a point, or at like a curve, and we'll click and drag, and you'll see that a number appears next to them. If you want this to be really precise, you'll hold shift, and that'll snap to 45-degree increments. So what we're going to want to do is bring it to the right side, so that way they're at the left and the right. What we're now going to do is select all 4 of them, again, shift clicking, so holding shift and then clicking. We're going to do the same thing. Control C, Control V. Gotta click and drag so that way they're on top of each other again. Then we're gonna take our cursor and go to the edges and hold Shift so that way it snaps to 45 degrees. And then we'll align them and let go. There we are. We have our bolts all lined up symmetrically around the frame. And we've got our porthole shape ready. Now the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to take our glass, the glass part, and we're going to Control C, Control V that. We're going to copy and paste it again. This will make sense a little later. We'll get to that in a sec, but the point is you're just going to want to put that back on top of the other glass. So with that, we'll open up our layers by clicking this arrow. See that we have all of our shapes that we've created so far, and we're going to rename these. So glass, bolt, and if you want to if you have a lot of things named the same thing, you can select it all, Control C, Control V. There we are. This one's glass, and then this one is frame. What we'll do is, I don't want this glass to be on top, so what we'll do is we'll click and drag, and you'll see that you have this blue line. Put it to where the blue line is between the bolt and the glass layer. You'll see that we now have the two glasses right next to each other, and the glass that was on top is now moved down. So this is where we'll leave it there, and we'll move on to the next element, which is going to be our little astronaut here. The next thing we'll do is we'll create a new layer by going to this box with a plus sign in the middle that says create new layer. We'll click it, and we'll actually lock the first one. You can do it by going to the space between the eye and the color, and you'll click it in the center, and there will be a lock icon. You can also just hide it or do both. The next thing we'll do is be creating our astronaut. And so the way I did it was I used a rectangle to create his head. Just create a head shape. And again, this is in the color that we want. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our solid color fill, and we're going to double click. And I just chose a skinish tone, like a brown, something like this, I guess. It's not really dreadfully important since he's going to be behind a few layers of glass. So the next thing we'll do is round off the edges of his head. For this, I'll take the direct selection tool, which is the white cursor, and you'll see that I have these various corners with these little dots next to them. So what we'll do is we'll click one corner, left click one corner, and we'll shift left click the other corner, the other top corner. And you'll see that both of these red circles are now here now, and what we're going to do is we're going to drag them until they connect, and you'll see that the red line forms. So he's going to have a rounded off head, and then for the bottom, what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing just to a smaller extent. So we'll get our direct selection tool, select one corner, select the other corner, and we'll drag it, but not all the way. We'll do maybe about halfway. If you want to look, it's maybe about 75 pixels, and we'll leave it there. Next thing we're going to be doing is creating the eyes. So what we'll do is create an ellipse, and we're going to draw an oval shape. So we want this to be quite narrow, about twice as tall as it is wide, so somewhere about there will work. And we'll change the fill color. So over there we want pure white for our fill, and we want just like 1 pixel. We'll actually go with 2 for our stroke. The next thing we'll be doing is creating the black of the eye. So what we'll do is we'll click and drag, create something of a similar shape. You don't want it to be as narrow as the as the initial eye. We'll change the color so that way it's black. We'll use our selection tool to drag it down. We kind of want it on the upper half of the eye for this to work. And the final thing we'll be doing is creating this little shine in the eye. So the same thing. You can also change colors preemptively. So what you can do is change your fill color before you draw the shape. This one is going to be white again, so we'll do. And this one is actually, you're going to want to hold shift when you drag. Let's create a perfect circle. Zoom in a little bit. Drag this over so that way it's about there. We now have our eye shape. Now I'm going to be copying this as a group, and I want it to be separate from this head shape right over here. So what we're going to do is, in our layer panel, what we're going to do is we're going to start by renaming. So this is going to be shine, this is going to be black, this is going to be white, this is going to be the head. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go to click this upper layer. This one is going to be the astronaut. And what we're going to want to do is create a new sublayer. It's right next to the create new layer. It's right next to it, and it has this little arrow next to it. What we can do is shift click our elements, all of the eye parts together. We can click and drag so that way the entire layer is blue. And this is going to be called eye. And what we can do now is, if you go over to this right section near the right of the bar, you can click over here and it'll select everything that's in that layer. So in this layer is a group that has all of these layers. You can see that these are also selected. So what we'll do is we'll Control C, Control V to create the second eye. We'll click and drag. So that way they're level with each other. So I should rename this to eyes. We'll create a new sublayer for this. This will be left, and we want all of these bottom ones. Didn't quite select everything that I wanted, so I'll just manually drag. Dragged one of the wrong ones, so it's the one that shouldn't be in here, so this layer will go back out. We'll then create a new sublayer for the right eye. Again, select all three. Click and drag, so that way they're all together. So one of the things that kind of goofed up was this layer is on top and it shouldn't be. This one is also on top and shouldn't be. So now we have our one eye fixed. The other one should look the same way. So this one should be on top, and this, the white of the eye, should be on the bottom. So it should be white, black, and then the shine. That's because the higher up you are on the layer chart, the more in front you are compared to the camera, the closer you are to the camera. So we have our eyes set, here's our head. So what we're going to do is we're going to click and drag them using these right ones, or you can select both by selecting these eyes ones. We'll click and drag. So that way they're on. Maybe a little big, so we'll scale those down a little bit. Maybe a little more. Bigger. Okay. The next thing we're going to create is the nose. So for this character, the nose is this kind of bulb bulby shape. If you ever played like the original Super Mario games, it kind of looks like the clouds, like half of a cloud. So what we'll do for that is, seeing these are still a little too big. Look for that middle mark. So for that, what we'll do is take our pen tool, click, and draw the diagonal, create it about there, enter. A little further out. Go to somewhere just below this line, and we're actually going to continue on with the line. And these are all just rough shapes, and then we're going to hold shift and head to the left. So at the end you'll create this kind of shape. To this, we'll move it up to where his nose should be. Now we actually don't want this white fill, so what we're going to do is we're actually going to do no fill, and that works just fine. The next thing we'll do is his nostril. You can see that he does have a little nostril. This is actually a little too far, so we'll actually drag that a little further back. What we'll do is, for this, we'll actually select our solid fill, we'll go to black, and we'll create a perfect circle by holding shift. We'll then use our direct select tool to select this bottom vertex, and we'll hit delete or backspace on our keyboard. This will create a half circle. We'll scale it down a little bit holding shift. And about there is good. We'll keep that all together, maybe move it over a little bit. That should be good. So with this, we need to move it in the layers panel. So right now it's within the eyes, and we actually want this on the same layer with the head, or the same section where the head is. And we'll actually click and drag these so that way they're between the astronaut and the eyes. And we'll actually move the eyes upwards. We want those on top. And just for fun, we'll create a new sublayer, call this nose, and we'll actually put those in there instead. So we have our eyes, we have our nose all together, and we have our head. The last thing we'll be doing is a mouth, which is just a half circle again. Same way we created his nose, hold shift, make it a little bigger. Use our direct select tool, select the bottom vertex, and hit backspace or delete. For this, we'll tilt it a little sideways, maybe scale it down a little bit. Yeah, that works just about fine. A little smaller. It doesn't have to be spectacular. This is just an intro demo series, so we're not worried about perfection. And that'll do it for our astronaut. So we'll lock that up. We then have our porthole, which we're actually going to put on top. We'll move these guys over a little bit. We'll actually unlock them. So we've got our astronaut. We've got our porthole. And that'll do it for this episode of the Adobe Illustrator demo series. In the next video, we'll be finishing up everything here. We'll be putting in our shadow, we'll be putting in our planet, we'll be putting in our text, as well as these little panel gaps everywhere. But that'll do it for this video. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.